Hi guys, it's April, and since the next book in the Stormlight Archives is coming out in November, I've decided that I need to do a reread of the whole series. I figured it would be fun to do a reread vlog for each of the books up until that point, and then maybe do a vlog of my first read through of the new book, just because I can't do a review of Brandon Sanderson without being biased towards how wonderfully awesome I find his books, and I just think it would be fun for me to go back and just react and stop and talk to you. So I will be reading Way of Kings for the next couple of days. So come with me on my journey of getting back into this universe. This universe is so massive and it's only 3 books right now. It's gonna be an adventure, and I'm gonna thoroughly enjoy it. So honestly, I haven't gotten very far in the part 1 of Way of Kings, but just getting back into this world and getting all of those names again, things are flooding back into my brain, and things that I didn't remember the first read through that I know are going to have significance later on in the next couple of books. We have the Oath Pack, and we got to see that disintegrate, and the fact that one of them is still left behind. And then we saw Zeth and his assassination of the king, and how all of that is going to later play into things that we will be getting in as we actually start the actual story with Kaladin and all of that. I like how Brandon Sanderson has set up the pre-prologue and the prologue in this book, simply because it gives you a chance to start to realize how the world is set up. You get introduced to shard blades and shard plates and lashing, and how that can pull objects down or push objects away or bind you to objects, and all of those different terms. And it's quick and simple, and it's not overwhelming, which some of these kind of worlds can be if you're just dropped in and you get extreme amount of info dumping. But I think that the way that Brandon Sanderson does it here, it leaves you the ability to slowly start to understand this world. But I'm excited to start getting into Kaladin's story and how all of that is going to start playing out. So as soon as I get a little further in this one, I will come back and I will probably have more words and hopefully not as frizzy hair. And oh, before I completely forget, you have to remember the phrase, you must find the most important words a man can say. Remember that. Remember it. So I am a little further in A Way of Kings. Still have the same fluffy hair, but yeah, this is just my life right now, and I don't care. Kaladin's backstory, Kaladin's fall from grace, all of the stuff that Kaladin has to deal with always hits me so hard. It's heartbreaking, and just going back and starting at the beginning and seeing one of his battles before his complete fall from grace, and just how he was Stormblessed, his nickname, and how he always worked to keep the younger ones alive. That was his main goal, and we don't get the reasoning behind all of that quite yet, but knowing that it's there and seeing him now in his current condition and how his nobleness is still there. It's not necessarily at the forefront right now, but I know where things are going to go. Kaladin is one of my favorite characters in this series, and I'm glad to be back in it. There is another character. I don't think she shows up in this story. I think it's in one of the later books, and I'm looking forward to seeing her again. But for now, it is good to have my Kaladin back, and just the beginning of his journey. It's so hard. I got dog toys everywhere. Excuse the mess. I'm about 150 pages into this book. At this point, we have a lot of Kaladin. We have a lot of Shallan. I've forgotten how much I love her because of her artistic ability and just how she's pushing herself out of her comfort zone because of all of her family backstory right now, and she really doesn't have any more options. She's trying to get into the good graces of Jasna, who is the sister of the king, and she is just, I've forgotten how much she's just. We also have Syl, which is the Windsprin that is attached to Kaladin, who is just the sweetest little thing ever. I love her to death. And then we have the start of everything that is going on between the Alethi and the Parshendi and all of the other races at the Shattered Plains, I believe, is the location where Kaladin becomes part of Bridge 4. I've forgotten how rough the beginning of this is, and we've got our two main characters right now of Shallan and Kaladin, and they are deeply struggling. They're trying to make things better for themselves or just deal with circumstances beyond their control, and that is ultimately going to play into the bigger storyline that is floating across all of these books. And it's an epic ride, and I am so excited to be back into this. Whether or not I'm actually going to finish this in the 3-ish days that I have given myself to read this, I don't know, but I'm gonna try. It is officially the next day, which is day 2, day 3-ish. I don't know how many days it's been at this point. I kind of started reading on Monday. At least I started telling you guys about the whole read on Monday. Read a good chunk of it on Tuesday. Today is Wednesday, and I'm about halfway through the first half. So about a quarter of the way through The Way of Kings right now. We have also been introduced to Dalinar, which his whole backstory and how he doesn't remember his first wife and all the things that go down around all of that, especially since his brother has been assassinated 5 years previously, and he's still taking care of his nephew and trying to lead him into being a good king, and all of the things that are going on with him, and the fact that something inside of him keeps telling him to unite them, but he doesn't know who them is, which remember that line, unite them. But then we also get to see his sons as well, which it is interesting how different the two sons are. So that whole family, interesting dynamic. I know at some point everyone's going to be interwoven together, but right now each of them have got their own separate sections that we keep flipping back and forth through, which Kaladin, we're starting to see some of his backstory with his brother Tien and how he grew up and why he has such a healer's mind rather than a warrior's mind, which I really, really like. And Syl, which, like I said, she is so adorable, and I love her character so much, and how she is pushing Kaladin to be his best self, and she doesn't even realize that, and she doesn't know where she's come from and why she is changing into what she is, and her whole history and what she is slowly leading up to. Shallan didn't get a lot of her in the section that I just read, starting from where I left off yesterday. She has officially become the ward of Jasna. She's finally convinced her to take her on, teach her things, but that's not really her end goal in becoming the ward. She's got some deep family stuff going on as well. All of these characters do, and I think that is what Brandon Sanderson does extremely well, is he builds out all of these characters so that they feel real and they feel different, which is amazing to see. And the fact that this world almost feels like it's the creatures and the plants feel like they come from underwater, but it's not necessarily true, because a lot of places are very arid-like until the storms come through and just wash everything, but it's never a gentle thing. There's always tremendous wind involved and lots of rain. You don't want to be outside. And the fact that we have creatures, we have eels that fly and other giant crustaceans that just live everywhere is kind of cool. The plants even are kind of like crustaceans or little sea anemones that just pop up when there's water about and live that way. It's cool. I like it. And the fact that there's also every once in a while these interludes where we get these extreme side characters that you don't know how they're going to interweave with the main story arc, but eventually you start to see some of the connections that Sanderson is trying to hint at. I like the way Sanderson does his writing. all I gotta say. But now it is lunchtime and I'm gonna go get food. I'm hoping to get this book done today at least, and then maybe I can just binge the second half tomorrow. But we'll see how all of that plays out. So I have about 150 pages left in part 1. I forgot to mention the last time I was talking to you guys about Wit. I absolutely enjoy Wit's commentary and how he insults to help improve people and push them in directions that he thinks will benefit them. There is a lot more to Wit. Wit is the king's wit for a reason. Hi, Fia. But also in this section, we start to see some of the visions that Dalinar starts to receive during the high storms. And we're trying to piece together why all of that is important, because we're starting to see a little bit of history, at least it feels like we're starting to see a little bit of history. We also have the namesake of this book, The Way of Kings, which is actually a book in this universe that helped with the codes and guidance of the earlier time when the Oath Pact was still a thing and we still had the Knights Radiance and all of that, and people knew what shard plates and shard blades and all of that were part of a bigger picture before everything started to go downhill. The Voidbringers were still part of history. We also have Kaladin and him starting to try and bring his bridge crew together. So we have Rock, who is a horn eater that we're starting to get to know. And then there's Tef as well. So we're starting to get to put faces to these bridge crew, and they're not necessarily dying off every single time that they have to go out and do their thing. I definitely think I can get this done today, which is good. I may even start in on part 2 today and not have to push myself really hard to get everything read tomorrow. There's something about this world. I know that Sanderson does a lot of interconnecting of all of his different universes. If you aren't aware of that, that's why it's called the Cosmere. Things are connected, and you don't have to see those connections to enjoy these books. But when you start to pick apart each of the series that Brandon Sanderson has done, you can kind of see how they all come together. And doing a reread of this, I'm starting to pick up pieces of that, and I'm enjoying that. Another update, I have about 80 or so pages left. It's time for me to feed the animals, but I thought I'd stop and give you a little update of where I'm at. I just got through the second interlude section of this, and here you got to see a little bit more of Szeth and his possible backstory if you read between the lines, and then of course his new mission and how things are gonna get a little bit messy. But at the same time, you have everything going on the Shattered Plains right now, and Dalinar questioning his own take on the world right now and whether or not he's fit to continue being a high prince. He's not trusting himself right now, unfortunately. And then you also get to see the start of the mentions of the thrill that happens to warriors in battle. To me, it feels kind of like when you talk about a berserker. They just get really into the fighting and everything else around them kind of disappears, and that's all they are. So after I feed the animals, I'm probably going to sit here and I'm going to finish these last 80 pages. I don't know for sure whether or not I'm going to start part 2. It depends on how things fall out today. But if I do, I will definitely come back and update you on everything going on, because I'm quite enjoying this right now. Oh, and before I decide to go feed the animals, there was an interlude section in here where we're following a merchant who is in the Shin land, which is very interesting to read because their country is more like our world, where grass doesn't move and there's dirt and they don't have to worry about the high storms and all of that. And just seeing the merchant's trainee and how she just thinks that non-moving grass is the dumbest thing ever. She doesn't like how dirty dirt is and all of those little quirks that we just assume is normal, but for her is like, what do you mean that plants don't move? How do they survive? Aren't they just going to be completely eaten? What is up with that? So I like that interlude there. That was cute. I just had to mention that real quick. So I'm not quite done with part 1, but I had to stop here and talk about some of my feels going on right now, because I just hit the section where Kaladin, he's devised this new way of carrying a bridge in hopes to eliminate the deaths that happens of his bridge crew. But unfortunately, that has ramifications that he didn't anticipate, and ultimately undermines like the whole siege of what's going on. And he's starting to realize the bigger picture of everything going on, while at the same time he wants his own men to survive. What does that mean for the actual soldiers? Even though using men as bait and hoping that they die so that fighting soldiers can make it through just makes my heart hurt. So we're starting to get to the deeper parts of where Kaladin is really about wanting to make his men's lives better, but knowing there's a lot more pieces at play than just his crew, and that's starting to really hurt him. But we're also starting to see some of Kaladin's uniqueness start to show through. I know it's coming, and seeing that journey up to what he is going to be, and knowing that he is willing to sacrifice himself for his men. This is why I really like Kaladin. He's only 19, but he has seen so much of life, and he's still willing to make all of these like really hard choices. I don't know if I at 19 would be able to be anything like him. So I just wanted to have a moment of, I love his idea of trying to keep his men alive, but watching the repercussions of that to the greater army is just so hard and unfair. So unfair. So I'm done. I've finished the first part. I don't think I'm going to start part 2 tonight. I've got some buddy reads that I need to catch up on. But there is one thing within all of this that I hope someday to see from Brandon Sanderson, and that is the book Shadows Remembered that is mentioned in this book. It's supposed to be stories of folklore and retellings of ghosts and beings and things like that that she's doing research with. I want to see that book. I want that to be a thing. If that is a thing, I need to know where it's at because I need to read it. But all of that seems to kind of coincide with the fact that Shallan is actually seeing shadows and figures, but she's only seeing it through her art. She's not actually seeing it with her naked eye, and I find that really, really fascinating. She has finally managed to steal the Soulcaster. So things are about to get a little messy because we also have Kaladin, who has just been put into a high storm and somehow mysteriously survives. So things are happening, and now on to part 2. Okay, so we are on day 3-ish, 4-ish of reread of Way of Kings. We are on part 2. I'm actually about 200 pages in at this point. Shallan has been caught in her thievery simply because she had been poisoned by someone who is going for Jashnah instead. And now she is going to be sent back home and nothing is solved. And it's kind of heartbreaking, but we have a lot of the shadow figures and the symbols and things starting to come through for her, which are creepy and eerie but fascinating all at the same time. We also have a little bit more of Kaladin's backstory and how he and Tian ended up in the army, and why Kaladin is suffering the way he is, why his brain kind of goes for battle but doesn't. He's split, and now he is on a mission to help his bridge team escape because he knows he can't keep them alive in the actual battles because that's not their purpose. Everybody wants them to die. They're bait, which also explains why there's now a parchman in their group who is now named Shen. So we're going to start seeing a little bit more of Parchment and what all of them are all about. We didn't see any of the Light Eyes in this chunk of this half of the book. I've got a feeling that they're coming later, if I remember correctly. But we are now in the very hard part of the Way of Kings because the characters that I love the most are not in the best of places. So that's a thing. So I have gotten a little bit further in this second half of Way of Kings. We've gotten the third interlude, where we get to see some other side characters. We also got more of Kaladin's backstory and why he really, really, really dislikes Light Eyes. Some of the things that they do to preserve their leadership, to preserve their honor and claim it for the betterment of their own people. It's kind of hard to swallow. Power corrupts and all of that. I do have to say that there was a little bit in here that I forgot to mention earlier where Kaladin's mom says something about Sprenz being the heart of change. And it's very easy to overlook that simple line. But when you just take that line and you start looking at everything that's going on with Kaladin, it kind of really hits home. And so the second reading of this, and when I saw that, I'm like, Mom's really smart. She doesn't get enough credit, but she's like, she has some knowledge. And the fact that Tef knows the possibility of what's going on with Kaladin, and he's trying to test the waters on what Kaladin may or may not know, or if his guess on what Kaladin is even correct, is very interesting to see. And then we also really start to get the feel of Dalinar and Navani and the interplay between those two, which, if you don't step back and view it from a certain perspective, can feel a little awkward because, hey, this is your dead brother's wife, and there is a lot of history there, but she is a very interesting character, and she doesn't get a lot of screen time in this first book, but she's coming back. She's definitely coming back. So at this point, I'm about halfway through this book. I've probably got a good several hours left of reading it. I will get it done. This vlog will be a thing that you see relatively soon. I think it's just because I enjoy this world so much that it's easy to get into and get back into these characters and see how their lives used to be and anticipate what is going to happen in book number 4 when it comes out in November. I'm really excited. Update time. I've got only about a quarter left of part 2, which means this is definitely gonna get done today. But beyond that, we get more of Dalinar and his visions and confirming that this isn't just him going crazy. There is something to it. We're starting to get bits and pieces of the past and starting to put together the Knight's Radiance and all of the things that are very unclear of in the past, since it's been about, 4,500 years or some such nonsense that the Desolations and the Voidbringers and all of the Knight's Radiance have existed. So people have built them up in various different ways. There's religious groups centered around them. Nobody knows what's true and what's not. And Dalinar is starting to get visions of things. We also have Tef, who is starting to train Kaladin in his surge binding and trying to get him to be all that he can be. That was a very weird way to state that, but essentially, yes. And of course, Wit had one final say and kind of pushed Kaladin into opening up more to himself of what he's really running from and what's going on in his own head, and passed him off a flute. Just gave him a flute. It's fine. Of course, on the more human relationship side of things, Dalinar and Navani may have started a secret tryst, which is always fun, because why not? I will definitely finish this book today. Probably won't talk to you again until it is all the way done. However, I have to go and feed the animals. They're actually doing pretty good right now. It's just the cats running around. You can see Fia back there. The dogs are passed out in my lap, but it's time for food. I am officially done with my reread of The Way of Kings. That last chunk, I've forgotten how dramatic that whole last chunk is, because we have Dalinar, who was betrayed in a battle. We have Kaladin, who has to make a decision on whether or not he is going to run with his men or try and save Dalinar's men. And then we have Shallan, who's making some realizations of what Voidbringers are. And I had forgotten how much this ending comes together in this cliffhanger, but not a cliffhanger. It's mostly about being very concerned on where the politics are going with all of this, because the king undermined himself simply because he is not wise enough to realize what all of his decisions actually mean. So Dalinar is trying to clean up after all of that, which Dalinar, great king, and I understand why he's not trying to grasp for kingship. And I think it's the people who don't want power that usually make the best leaders. I mean, you can see that in Kaladin, and you can see that in Dalinar. And that's kind of a theme that goes through this whole series, at least that I've noticed. Now, I wasn't planning on reading the rest of the books right away, because my TBR is always so ridiculous. I was only going to read one of these a month. I might bump up the next book sooner than I originally thought I was going to. So you will probably be seeing another reread vlog for that book coming up fairly soon at some point. I can't really promise that though, because I can get distracted by all of the other review books and book club books and other things that I need to get read at various different times. But this world and some of these characters, Wit is just so much fun. And then some of the other characters in Bridge 4, they're just so real. And the giggles are real. But then there's also this like very human nature to everybody and this hardship that a lot of them go through. I just like how the story is laid out and how Brandon Sanderson writes all this. I don't know if I have much more to say than that, besides the fact that I am glad that Shallan finally got her act together and stood up for herself and realized what was really going on. So her whole storyline is really going to be taking off this next book, which I'm excited about. There's just something exciting about this series. I'm gonna leave it here, besides the fact that, you know, if you've made it this far, congratulations, you are now my favorite. Tell me down below some of your highlight moments of this whole book, your favorite characters, your favorite moments, the moments where you wanted to chuck the book across the room. And of course, if you aren't subscribed yet, subscribe so you can catch all of my reread vlogs as they happen, as I go through the Stormlight Archives again. Other than that, I heart your beautiful faces. Bye.